green. I think it's the icing colour, isn't it?
Exactly. Perhaps best left alone. But anyway, Elena is here to talk about the French papers this Friday morning and the French parliamentary elections, as we mentioned in the news bulletin, coming up in just a couple of days, presumably preoccupying the press.
Of course they are. France's long election process finally ends with the fourth election day in the next 6 weeks on Sunday. Now, François Hollande, says the front page of Les Echos, is set to see a big socialist majority that he needs in Parliament to push through the measures that he wants to pass. They've got a poll saying he should get 295 socialist candidates elected in the French Assemblée Nationale. That's a nice, comfortable majority. There's lots of quite well-known personalities, though, profiled in that paper who might find their own ability to hold on to their seats severely damaged come Sunday. There was Ségolène Royal, of course, the socialist candidate back in 2007. Looks like she's going to lose to a dissident socialist, Olivier Fahlorny, and now that all the right are calling on voters to vote for him rather than her. Then, of course, there's a number of people rather close to Nicolas Sarkozy, his former ministers, people who were close to the outgoing president, who look very like they might be losing their seats. So some anxiety over at the UMP. That's, of course, people like Claude Guéant, the Interior Minister, who looks like he's going to lose in a suburb of Paris to another right-wing rival who says that his immigration policy or his policy generally on race issues was just a bit too far right for him. Then, of course, there's the question of Front National candidates all across the country that are trying to push out generally UMP incumbents. So some, like Sarkozy's former spokeswoman, Nathalie Cuscu-Morizet, are going for attacking the FN, and as a result, they've found themselves on a blacklist drawn up by Marine Le Pen. In some constituencies, like Cuscu-Morizet's, Marine Le Pen is even calling on voters to vote for the socialists just to push out those UMP candidates they don't like. On the other hand, some former ministers like Nadine Morano have caused even more controversy by saying things that are closer and closer to the Front National to try and win over those voters.
So the relationship between the Front National and that sort of mainstream right wing is getting more and more controversial as well. And UMP politicians are now being accused of cozying up to the far right.
Yes, they're in hotter and hotter water with a series of politicians saying things like, well, there's no reason why the Front National should be excluded from mainstream politics, or that they're just as valid a party as any other. Someone who's been accused of those kind of statements is Jean-François Copé, the UMP leader, who's given a front-page interview to Le Figaro. Now, his main line in that interview is that the left shouldn't be given a big majority because that would be a blank cheque for 5 years for them to do whatever they like. On the issue of the Front National, though, he tells the paper that, well, if the left is going to ally with the extreme left, of course they've allied with the communists and people who voted for Jean-Luc Mélenchon, then what's the difference between that and going with the extreme right? Although he denies, of course, that the UMP will actually make any kind of electoral agreement with Marine Le Pen's party. The Le Monde, the more left-leaning paper, on its front page has got the editorial, "The UMP and the FN poisonous common values" today, by which they say that even if Le Pen's party doesn't actually win many candidates, at the very most they'll get 2 to 3 seats in the Assemblée Nationale this Sunday. But that's not what really matters. What matters is that she's scored an ideological victory in winning over a huge part of the mainstream right to her views.
OK, now moving on a bit, France isn't, of course, the only country going to the polls this weekend, as we've been discussing. Greece, of course, also holding an election.
Yes, that makes Libération's front page. Anger or fear is the headline. They say that in a country where hospitals are turning away patients because they can't afford to look after them, where teachers aren't coming into classes because they're not being paid, where the wealthy are getting their money out of the country as quickly as possible, the election looks more like Russian roulette than a normal experiment in democracy. But they say anger, of course, represented by the left-wing party Syriza, who have said that they won't hold by the provisions of the memorandum that got IMF inspectors looking over Greece's accounts. And on the other hand, there's the fear of Greece being pulled out of the EU, represented by the rather more traditional right New Democracy, which could still win, although it does seem to be on a knife edge.
OK, and finally, a big weekend as well for the former French president, Nicolas Sarkozy, potentially.
Well, it could be, and in the worst possible way, which is that he could find himself in front of a judge theoretically as soon as this weekend. His presidential immunity expires at midnight tonight, a month after he stepped down from office, and there are at least 4 different ongoing court cases in which judges would like to hear from him, including, of course, most notoriously, the Bettencourt affair. Did he get envelopes of cash from France's wealthiest woman? And also, was he involved in 1995 in channeling kickbacks from France's arms deals to Saudi Arabia and Pakistan into the campaign accounts of then Prime Minister Edouard Balladur? There's several judges who'd like to hear from him.
OK, we will wait and see. Thank you very much indeed, Elena, for that look at today's French papers. Let's get a reminder now of our top stories this hour.